Well, it is 10 o'clock, so I believe we will get started right now. Welcome to the 23rd Annual Metro Children's Water Festival. The festival is normally a field trip experience for fourth grade students held the last Wednesday of every September at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. If we would have been having this a virtual or live festival, we would have had this yesterday. So we changed to the virtual festival because of COVID-19. My name is Paula Leopold, and I serve on the Metro Children's Water Festival Planning Committee, along with this list of people. We are representing counties and watersheds and state and federal agencies, and our purpose is to work with presenters to be able to share some great information about water information. And so we're very glad that we've had some presenters that have been able to convert their presentation from being an in-person festival to this virtual method. So as you are participating right now in this live class, if something works out where you aren't able to see everything or hear everything correctly, we are also live streaming them to YouTube, and we'll be able to give you that address as well. And if you miss a live session, they are recorded, and you can take a look at those. You can find those on our metrocwf.org website, or you can watch a pre-recorded video of some other topics that we have, or some lesson plans. Also, you can find those on that metrocwf.org website. So this morning, if you wanted to ask some questions, you can click on the Q&A icon in the bottom of your screen, and then just type in your question in that box and hit the send button. And now I would like to introduce Abby Olson, and she is a park ranger with the National Park Service. Our presentation this morning is Mystery of the Disappearing Waterfall. Welcome, Abby.
Hello. How are you guys? So, like Paula said, my name is Abby, and I am a park ranger for the National Park Service. And today we're going to be talking about what happened to a great waterfall that used to be in what is now downtown St. Paul. So, in order to figure out what happened to this waterfall, we need to know a little bit more about the area first. So, to start off, as she said, I'm a park ranger for the National Park Service, and it turns out that right here in the Twin Cities, we actually have a national park. It's called the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, and it is a 72-mile stretch of the Mississippi River right here in the Twin Cities. And that's important because national parks are a great way to view the natural resources of a area, and they're super important for people to know why they're in a spot, right? What happened in an area, what you can go check out, and that sort of thing. And the Mississippi River is super important because it has a lot of history and science and other amazing features that you can go check out. And it's right here in the Twin Cities. And so we're just letting you guys know it's here, but we're also telling you a few of its really cool stories. So one of those stories is about this waterfall, and I'm going to tell you about it right now. So what happened to that waterfall and where did it go, right? Because waterfalls just don't disappear, right? Those are one of our questions we're going to answer today. We're also going to talk about how that waterfall had an impact on our two twin cities. And let's define those two twin cities, right? We have two amazing cities right here along the Mississippi River. One of them is St. Paul, and the other one is Minneapolis. So those are our two twin cities, and how that waterfall had anything to do with their location. That's another question we're going to answer today. And then finally, which one is stronger, rock or water? All right. And I'm hoping, since you're at Children's Water Festival, you might already have a good idea about that first one. All right. Or about that last question there. Excuse me. All right. So I'm going to start our adventure into this mystery today by time traveling with you. And so if you would for me, it really helps for you to time travel if you close your eyes a little bit, and I will lead you through our time traveling experience. All right. So I do actually have a picture to help you imagine this little time travel. So I will help you on our time traveling journey by showing you a picture first, and maybe it will help you. All right. That's not the picture. However, that is a really cool spot on the Mississippi River. This is our picture. So, closing your eyes and imagining that you and a friend have a time machine and you've built it together and you're traveling back 12,000 years into the past. And as you and your friend have arrived back in the past, you get to about where St. Paul is today, and you hear a rumbling off in the distance. And you know it can't possibly be thunder because it's a beautiful sunny day, right? And so you decide you're going to investigate. So you walk off and you start walking towards this rumbling sound. And as you get closer and closer, you start it starts getting louder and louder. And all of a sudden, as you break through the trees, these beautiful pine trees, you see right ahead of you a giant waterfall. And as you get a little bit closer, you starting to get wet from the spray of this beautiful waterfall ahead of you. And right as you're in front of this waterfall, the sun breaks out from behind one of those clouds up in the sky, and you see a giant rainbow that has broken right in front of that waterfall because of all the spray right in front of you. And this waterfall in front of you here is over 200 feet high, which is the height of a 20-story skyscraper. And it's over a mile wide, which is actually bigger than Niagara Falls is today, right? So if any of you have been there, it's bigger than that, right? And this waterfall has got a beautiful little bird, right? Nice little, maybe like eagle type bird, right? From 12,000 years ago, flying right over the top of it. All right. Whoa, pretty cool. So jump back into present day, right? Jump back into your time machine, come back to today, and tell me if you could maybe enter into your question and answer box. What possible evidence do we have that could possibly tell us that this waterfall existed 12,000 years ago, right in what is now downtown St. Paul? Does anybody have any idea what possible thing could we touch and look at and examine that would be left over from that time period 12,000 years ago that could possibly tell us that that waterfall existed? Anybody have any ideas? What could be left over from 12,000 years ago? We got some people raising their hands. That's good. Can you go to the question and answer section and possibly write it in there? Ooh, lots of people raising their hand. That's good. That's good. Whoa. Ha, Christopher got it. Hey, nice job. And Miss Lamana from Higher Ground, you guys got it. Nice job. Rocks. That's exactly right. Very good. Nice job. So a lot of people sometimes guess trees or maybe the water. Yep. All those things probably don't stick around for 12,000 years, right? But absolutely correct. Rocks. They existed 12,000 years ago and they still exist today. And that's what geology is all about. Rocks, exactly. So those rocks that existed 12,000 years ago could actually still be sitting alongside the river or even in the river today. And we can look at those rocks, and those rocks could actually tell us the story of that waterfall. And I actually have some of those rocks right here. And they could tell us about what happened to that waterfall. All right. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how those rocks were formed. All right. And then I'm going to show you those rocks and we'll figure out if we can tell what happened to the story. Okay. All right. What happened to that waterfall? So first off, let's see what happened to this beautiful waterfall. Okay. So waterfall, gorgeous, right? Basically, our waterfall started about 450 million years ago. Now, that's a long time ago, guys. It is longer than the dinosaurs, older than the dinosaurs. And basically, that 455 million years ago or so, the United States, as we know it now, was covered in water, a very shallow sea, right? And that water started to kind of settle out, right? It was very choppy at first, and then it kind of started to settle down. And when water starts to settle down, sediments or the particles that have been floating around in that water for a really long time start to settle down and sink out, right? And I have an example of what that looks like when that happens. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So, I have a jar here. I'm going to stop sharing this so you can see. I have a jar here with some sediments in here. This is a clay sediment, all right? And I'm going to add another kind of sediment, which is sand, all right? You can see some sand here. So I'm going to get my spoon out here and spoon some sediment into my jar here as well. Get some in here. Try not to spill it on my computer. All right. And then I'm going to add our magic ingredient of the day, water, to emulate our inland sea. So put some water in there. Ooh, make a nice little soup in here. All right. And then to show you what that inland sea looked like before it started to settle out, I'm going to shake this up. Okay. Get it all mixed up, just like our inland sea. So this is our sea with all of its little animals swimming around in it, right? It's shaking it up. Not very clear, right? as a sea might be, right? And then when I stop shaking it, it's going to start settling out, right? Right? So I stop shaking it and whoa, look at that. You can already see that sand layer coming out, right? And if we like let this sit around for a little bit, I bet we'd probably see that second layer come out too, that clay layer, that dirt layer come out, right? So I actually have one that I've been waiting on for quite a long time. And so here is a different one. All right, this one's been sitting for a very long time. So you can see we still have that sand layer on the bottom. Now we've got this clay layer in the middle, and we've got that water layer on top. Look at that. Pretty cool. So our little science experiment has proved that we have sedimentary rocks. All right, water is actually going to sort water or sediments into layers for us, right? That is pretty cool. So let's see how that happened back in our inland sea. So as our inland sea started to settle out, our first layer that came out is going to be our sand layer, right? Our heaviest sediment drops to the bottom. And then the second layer that comes out is going to be that clay or that finer dust or dirt layer is going to drop out. And then we actually have a third layer too. And unfortunately, none of the animals in our inland sea survived the settling of this sea, it turns out. So as the water started to drop out of this sea and started to evaporate, all the animals with all the shells that they have created for themselves, right? They started to kind of grind up together. And so that third and final layer on the top is actually all of the shells of those animals in different layers of kind of grinding up. So some of them are going to be very fine ground up powder. Some of them are going to be like half broken, right? And then some of them are going to be full shells, just like sitting in that layer. And so our third layer is actually just shells, right? Pretty cool. And if you wait 450 million years and put a lot of gravity on top of it, right? And a lot of time, just very patiently waiting for that 3 layers to do something, you're going to get some rocks, right? So that's how we got the geology of pretty much almost all, not completely, but almost all of Minnesota, all right? So as you can see here, we've got 3 layers, right? They're kind of pretty well defined there, but on the bottom, we've got a very sandy layer, which we call sandstone. And then in the middle there, you can kind of see there's a darker layer, all right? Looks a little bit like that clay I showed you. That's our shale, all right? And then the top layer, that beautiful sandy golden color, that is called limestone. And lime is another way of saying that the substance that animals will make their shells out of, right? Like clams and crabs and things like that. So we have sandstone, shale, and limestone in that order. On the bottom, sandstone, shale in the middle, and limestone on the top. And that's how we got our 3 rocks that are basically under your feet in a lot of Minnesota, right? Not all of Minnesota, but a lot of it, right? That's pretty cool. 455 million years in the making. It's pretty awesome, all right? Now, waterfall. How did we get that waterfall? So our story actually continues into about 12,000 years ago. Their last glacier in Minnesota started to melt, and that water found its way through the Minnesota and then Mississippi River Valley and found the edge of that rock formation, right? And when that happened, it created a waterfall, right? And that waterfall started its journey right around where downtown St. Paul is right now. Of course, at the time, there was no city because that was about 12,000 years ago. There weren't any people in the area, right? So that water found its way to the edge of that rock formation and created this beautiful waterfall, huge, 200 feet high and over a mile wide, very nice little arc, a little bit like Niagara Falls is, right? And unfortunately, 455 million years is not quite enough time for that waterfall to, or for that time and pressure to create a perfect rock. So that sandstone, that beautiful rock that we talked about, is not exactly a perfectly formed rock, right? So sandstone is actually kind of a weak rock as far as rocks go. And so it actually is able to be eroded pretty quickly. So let me show you some of these rocks since I didn't do that yet. My bad. So let's talk about that sandstone. This is sandstone. It is a very white rock, sometimes yellow. And if you go down into the Southwest, it sometimes turns red or even orange. And it's beautiful down there. So sandstone is a very soft rock. And you can actually, with your fingernail, pick at pieces and they will fall onto your computer board, right? So be careful. And when I say soft rock, I mean only in terms of geology terms, right? So it's not actually something you're going to use as a pillow, but soft in the fact that I can erode it or wear it away with my fingernail, right? That's what I mean. All right. Shale is a dark kind of gray rock. It's a medium hard rock, or excuse me, it's a very hard rock, And you will see in shale a lot of fossils. Fossils are pretty awesome. My favorite fossil is called a crinoid. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it is a very tiny little circle, right there. I have one that has actually fallen out of a piece of shale. Looks a little bit like that. You see that Cheerio? It's a pretty awesome fossil that came from an animal that looks like this. Yeah. So this animal was connected to the bottom of that inland sea, and it had a little cup that was kind of jelly-like, which had tentacles attached to it. And those tentacles would just wave in the ocean and wait for an animal to swim by. And then when something got stuck in those tentacles, it would grab it and pull it down into the cup and digest it for food. And I think that is pretty awesome because it kind of reminds me of a Venus flytrap. And if I can find something 455 million years ago that looks like something today, that's pretty cool. I think that was really awesome. So, that's pretty cool. So that's our shale. You'll find lots of different kinds of fossils in there. And then our third and final rock on the top is called limestone. And limestone will very often find fossils that look like shells in them. Can you see those ones? Shells that remind you of the shells that you will find at a beach, which you should use as a reminder that Minnesota used to be covered by an inland sea. So that's your constant reminder. So sandstone, which is often found as a yellow or very soft, a white or soft yellow rock, right? And a softer one. Shale, which is that dark gray color. And you can find lots of fossils in it, including our favorite crinoid. And that soft golden limestone. And limestone is actually a medium hard rock, which means that it's easily shaped by a chisel, right? And so that's why you'll find lots of buildings, very historic or older buildings in Minneapolis and St. Paul used bricks made out of limestone because it is easily made into bricks, which can be made into buildings. So you can find lots of them around Minneapolis and St. Paul. Okay, so those are our rocks. Now let's talk about how they shaped the Twin Cities. Okay, here we go. So now we get to the point where our glacier 12,000 years ago was melting and sending a whole bunch of water, more than the usual amount of water, down the Mississippi River. Lots of water, sending tons of water over the edge of this rock and creating a beautiful waterfall. That water was falling over the edge and hitting that sandstone. And as you recall, as I just said, that sandstone can be worn away by my fingernail, which means that rushing water from that waterfall is definitely going to start eroding that waterfall. So that looks a little bit like this. That sandstone starts to be eaten away or eroded by that waterfall. And eventually, so much so that it creates a shelf of shale and limestone, which is a lot more impervious or definitely not going to be eaten away or eroded by that water. And eventually, that limestone and shale shelf is going to be pushed so hard by that water, all of that water pushing down on top of that shelf, that it is going to crack and fall in chunks into the Mississippi River. You see that? All right. So this is called a recession or a receding of our waterfall. So you can see that the waterfall started at one point and ended a few feet back, right? So our waterfall moved from one spot here and ended at a different spot here. Awesome. So our waterfall is moving backwards or upriver in the direction against the water. A little counterintuitive, right? But it's going backwards, upriver, right? So leaving these huge chunks, of course, in the Mississippi River as it travels. Pretty cool. All right, so let's see where it went, all right? Our waterfall started right about here in what is now downtown St. Paul, and it moved backwards, upriver, over lots and lots and lots of time, and headed up to what is now, oh, here it is, in downtown Minneapolis. Does anybody know of a waterfall in downtown Minneapolis? I think I know of one. It's called St. Anthony Falls. Turns out that the Dakota people had been watching this waterfall for a very long time. And when the European explorers kind of made their way to this area, there was a guy by the name of Father Hennepin that asked the Dakota people to show him, hey, do you have anything interesting around here? And the Dakota's people said, oh yes, we have this beautiful waterfall. And so when they shared the waterfall with Father Hennepin, he named it after his favorite saint, Saint Anthony, because of course he couldn't pronounce the Dakota name for it, right? And Father Hennepin said, I'm going to call it St. Anthony Falls. And then he wrote back to all his friends over on the East Coast, and they said, wow, we have to come see this waterfall. And you know what? We got to try to make some money off of it. And that's exactly what they did. All these people from the East came and tried to make money off the falls. And basically, it's not too hard, because falling water will turn turbines, which are basically like fancy fan blades. And so you can turn those turbines, and if you connect that turning machinery to other machinery, you can make it do work for you, which is what we call water power. So in downtown Minneapolis, they were using the falling water to turn machinery for a really long time. And they made logs from trees into lumber. And then eventually they made grains into flour using the water power, the falling water, to turn machinery for them. And that's how we got the huge town we now call Minneapolis, because people moved from all over the country to try to get jobs in that town and work in those mills. So that's how we got our city of Minneapolis. It popped up because there was a waterfall right there, and people wanted to get jobs and work there. That's pretty cool. It was all because of that waterfall. But we do have one other twin city here in this area, and that's downtown St. Paul, right? So the other city got its start because of that waterfall too, but for a very different reason. It was because that's where the waterfall had been at one time in the past, and it left behind some very large chunks of rock, right? As it was receding, it left giant chunks of shale and limestone in the river as those shelves of rock, right, fell into the river. And so when giant boats, like these ones here on the right-hand side, came up the Mississippi River, they found those giant chunks in the Mississippi River, and they said, I am not driving through that. I do not want to ruin my boat. So they stopped right where that waterfall had started its recession, and everybody on the boat got out with their family members and their horses and their carts and all of the skills that they had, and that became the port of St. Paul. It was the farthest that you could go on the Mississippi River without ruining your boat, right? And it became a city because it was the highest point on the river that you could go without ruining your boat. So eventually they just stopped calling it the Port of St. Paul and just started calling it St. Paul. And that's how we got our beautiful city. So two cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, got their start because of their waterfall, but for very different reasons. One, for starting milling right on the river there, right on top of the waterfall, and one for its use of the river for navigation and it being the top of navigation on the river. How great is that, guys? Geology and rocks and that waterfall was the reason that we started our two twin cities. So the big question of the day is, which one is more powerful, right? Which one is stronger, water or rocks? And after we talked about how a waterfall is receding rocks on the Mississippi River. A waterfall is starting to eat away at rocks on the Mississippi River. What do you guys think? Can you answer that question for me? What do we think? Feel free to put it in the question and answer section, or we can open up the chat now. And if anybody has any questions for me, or if they want to answer that question, go ahead. Ooh, Miss Jenny Vickers says water, and I agree. Very good. Water has the power to erode a lot of things. Water can erode soil. Water can erode rock. Water can erode a lot of things. Yeah. Good job. Water is very powerful. Nice job. Good job, guys. All right. So if anybody has any questions, I have a few minutes to answer them. Go ahead and put them in the question and answer or in the chat. And then we will wrap up in just a minute. Storm sewer, interesting. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to go, rocks are solid, why do they break by water? Very good question. If rocks are solid, why do they break by water? That is a good one. So sometimes, like our sandstone, rocks are not very well put together. So this is a sedimentary rock, which means that it's very small particles that have been pushed together and very, very long time, maybe not quite long enough. But these particles are not exactly like tiny squares that can perfectly fit together. So they're kind of glued together, but they're really just like a hodgepodge of all that, those particles. And so there's a lot of space in between them. So I don't know if you can kind of see it, but it kind of looks like there's little holes in between them. And if water can get in there, then it can break it apart, right? So sandstone, for example, can be broken apart by water. However, if you look at limestone, limestone is very fine particles. So there's not a lot of space in between there for water to get in. So limestone, as we saw in our picture, was not broken apart by water. So there's also the question of time. Water over time will break away a lot of things. So if you are dripping water on something for centuries, for the amount of lives of a human, like grandchildren and grandchildren and grandchildren, a long, long time, it will break away a rock, right? But if we're talking about just a little bit, like I dump a water bottle on a rock, it's not going to break apart a rock, right? But if you do it for centuries, then yeah, it's going to have an effect on a rock, right? So that's a really good question. Way to go. It all depends on the makeup of the rock. Can water break metal? Oh, metal. Metal is a lot harder for water to break apart. That's a good question. Metal is a very smooth surface that has very, very few impurities in it, very smooth, so water can't get into those little tiny impurities in the surface. So it would take a very long time. But I think after about 1 million years, yeah, it could, but probably not in your lifetime. Good questions, guys. I love it. Can water break plastic? Yes. But again, it would take a really long time. we have done our very best job to make plastic as unbreakable as possible. And just so you guys know, that's why we have created recycling programs. And that's also why you will find lots and lots of plastic in the ocean, right? Plastic is pretty unbreakable. It's also hydrophobic, if you're familiar with that term. Hydrophobic, it literally means afraid of water. So it's oil-based, which means that it doesn't mix well with water. If water can break rock, why can't it break metal? Because of the particles, buddy. Like I said, the rock has impurities and it's very uneven, and the particles have spaces in between them. Whereas with metal, we've made it very, very smooth and shiny, right? And so it's very, very difficult for the water to get inside those spaces. All right. Well, water can rust iron for sure, and then it gets really difficult it breaks it apart sooner, that's for sure. I don't know what that is. I'm sorry, buddy, I can't read particles. Oh, particles. Particles. Got it. Particles are like very small little pieces. Particles. Very small little pieces. So like when I was scratching this, the pieces would come apart. Or like sand is made up of a whole bunch of particles, right? So like all the sand that came across on my computer when I brushed it off, those are particles. Yeah. Particles. I sounded it out. We're good. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me so much, and good questions. Make sure to continue asking questions. All right. Sometimes Google's helpful. Sometimes it's not. Ask a teacher. They know so many things. Yay. All right. Keep asking questions. Please keep learning. And I'm going to hand it back over to Paula, and she's going to tell you what you guys have to do next. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And don't forget to visit your local national park.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you so much. That was very informative and fun and very fun. So thank you too to you participants. We really enjoyed having you a part of our class today. You'll see an evaluation when the webinar is over. So please take a few minutes to complete that and submit it to us. And if you want to have some more water fun from our festival, you can certainly take a look at some recordings of some live classes that we've had earlier this week if you happen to miss those. Or we have some recordings of some other classes, some videos, and we have some lesson plans there as well. And you'll see a resources webpage on our website, metrocwf.org, where there's some even more water fun related education things for teachers and students. Thank you so much for attending today. Goodbye.